Hi, I'm Fight, and today I want to talk about gt4atproto. And I think as our first order of business, we have to answer what atproto actually is. Because I think unless you talk to me during this week, or maybe you're a federated technologies enthusiast, you haven't heard about it. And if you go to the website at proto.com and you look at the docs, the first sentence is the Authenticated Transfer Protocol, aka atproto, is a federated protocol for large-scale distributed social applications. And if your mind works a little bit like mine, then your answer is this. I have no idea what that sentence actually means. And that's not a dig at their documentation. It's actually very good. But I think it's really hard to convey complex information in just one sentence, right? Elevator pitches are always hard. And so we're going to deconstruct it a little bit and then reconstruct what is important for us. So atproto is a federated protocol, which means that you have many servers and services that hold data, not just one. And they all are kind of, you have a kind of redundancy within the system. Now, this is not super accurate, but we also don't need to go very deeply into that part of the system. There is a concept called a personal data server, a PDS, which holds personal data, all kinds of data that belongs to you. And you go to that server and you retrieve that data. You do that using your identity, a DID, distributed identity, and then you communicate via an RPC-based protocol, XRPC, and then there are namespaces, so you have NSIDs as well, and suddenly you're drowning in abbreviations and you don't know where you're going anymore. So to spare you all of this, and unless you're really interested in federated protocols, I'm going to just talk about the part that's important for us, which is the client environment. More specifically, we built a client environment for one of the applications on top of atproto, and then the underlying more general atproto infrastructure fell out of that because it was necessary. But the case study is always the application, which is Blue Sky. Blue Sky is a social network. It looks a little bit like Twitter when you go to it. And personally, I'm not super interested in that form of content, but it's kind of neat to see federated services. Mastodon is another that some people might be familiar with, and seeing how they solve these things. Blue Sky operates also as a company, and they're the people who actually formulated atproto. So that's a little bit about that. And at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, you built a social media client, so what? And I think what makes it interesting, we're going to explore, at least from my point of view, what makes it interesting a little bit. But we're also going to talk maybe a little bit about the broader implications of building the way we built what our client, our environment. So the first thing about the documentation that you will notice is that everything is specified in, it's called a lexicon, which is a JSON-based thing that tells you, well, in this case, you have something called update handle under a namespace atproto identity. So if you've ever programmed Java, this might give you some flashbacks, but basically it's a namespace, right? And then you have a procedure. So that means it's basically a post request that updates the handle of the account. And then the input is a JSON blob. And the schema is, well, it's an object that has a handle as a required property, and it's the only property. Its type is string, and its format is handle. And already you might be thinking, that's kind of neat. I might be able to do something with that. And then data types are also like that. So this is a follow, this time not in the atproto namespace, but in the Blue Sky namespace. So follows are specific to Blue Sky. And you have a record type. This means it's a data type. Its description is social follow. It's an object. It has two required properties, the only properties again. subject, which is a string of the DID format. That's the distributed identity. We don't care about what it looks like in this case. And created at, which is a date time. So we can already kind of infer things from that. And what we did, starting with that, is we just generated all the code, because you can. And so the follow looks like this. And it looks like generated code, so it's a little bit eh. But so if you look at the created at property, you will see that it has a little bit, it has a prefix, and then it will tell you what it returns, and it's a regular accessor. And the prefix is there because some of the things are called class and type and so on, and you don't really want to override the class method. So the description is just a Magritte description. We generate that for all the things, and then we also generate how to get this type from a request or a response. So that's kind of neat. We do the same with the client. So there is a generated client that has a million of very generated looking methods. One of them is com@proto identity update handle. It takes a handle and then makes the request and deserializes it somehow, right? So that's kind of neat. That took about maybe 2 days to get it working first. And we had, you know, a little bit of a client. So that's neat, but that's also only the start. I'm gonna now show you how to do that. We have the whole repo comes with a Lepiter booklet that shows you how these things are done. So that's kind of interesting. It's also how we developed, right? We thought about, okay, how could this look? And we wrote the code, and then, you know, a booklet fell out of it. So I have the @proto Git repository on disk. This is in another page. I already have it, so I can just import, and I don't have it on disk. Beautiful. So what should we do? Well, we should import it, and that will take a second. So it doesn't actually exist. I was wrong. So we can now download the repository. Luckily, I'm in the live environment, so that is not scripted, by the way. I just did a little boo-boo, which is okay. This might take a second. I'm not quite sure. It shouldn't take too long unless the internet is unstable. Now, once we have that, we can import that just to make sure, yes, it exists, it's fine, and we can parse it. So now we can generate the code again. So let's try that again, right? So we take this, and we can then make a model builder, and it will generate a change for us, a refactoring change. Well, now the thing is up to date, so we don't need to generate anything, but we could also remove all the code. So that would be 101 changes right now, right? So you can always apply and remove this sort of thing with the builder. The builder also gives us the possibility to kind of change all the things about the generated code. And that isn't really super hard, but it is kind of nice because you can explore things. Right? But that doesn't really give us anything. It gives us a client. That's not super interesting. The interesting part is when you get to actually use it. So here we have a little snippet, and I can reply to the snippet. I need to log in, and then I can start typing, or I can start typing before, but if I want to publish it, I need to log in before, and all of that sort of stuff. But between the client and the snippet, there's a bit of a disparity, right? So maybe we should bridge that gap before we move on. And this is where views come in. So this is how we did things. We made a way to log in. So I'm going to log in right now. And I have the password hopefully still in my, yes, I do. And we built just a ton of views. We probably started, if I remember correctly, with like getting the posts as a list. Then we figured out, okay, who's following me and who am I following? That's kind of neat. And then I can also look at my posts, and then I can look at my timeline. And finally, after all of these are written, right, increasingly complex, increasingly interesting, I figured, well, now I want to interact with things. So I can have a create post view. And that is where then the interesting stuff falls out of the exploration. Now, there's another thing about having this timeline locally and having this timeline be programmable rather than on a website. I can just customize it. I can say, well, I don't want any replies in my feed because I don't like looking at my feed and seeing half-baked conversations and people replying to things I don't care about. And maybe I only want to look at cat pictures today, so I'm only going to look at the things that have media. And there are no cats here right now, so that's a bit of a bummer. Oh, well, that's okay. We're going to look at cats another time. Oh, there's a dog. That's nice. Now, that's kind of fun to look at, and maybe not all that interesting until you realize that you've just customized your entire experience of going on social media. You can, apart from the filters that the company gives you in their client, you can just change everything about it. You can change the ordering, you can change the prioritization. You know, when people talk about how they want to be in control of the algorithm, this is it. This is being in control of the algorithm. And all of that just came naturally, fell out of having to write a client. Now that we know how to do things, we can actually then create the post. And this is just the same view, more or less, that we had on the object anyway. We just made it a snippet and made it a little bit more sexy. So it will tell you, you know, how many characters. You can only post 300 characters because that is somehow, they need magic numbers, and you can log in and so on. You can define that it's a reply to something, these sorts of things. But I'm just going to write one, and we're going to discover something that's kind of fun, because Blue Sky actually supports arbitrary embeds. So that means that I can embed a little Epicter page here. I have it right there, and I can publish it. And there it is. It's now published because it has a date and all of that stuff, and the buttons have changed. And now when I go back to my stream, maybe I'm going to look at the postcards, and I'm going to update. And I will say I will take this. And it won't show this because it's a custom record, but it will show this in my little custom view that I wrote that shows the embedded page. And that view is really just, all it does is it checks whether the post has a page, and then it deserializes it. So that's kind of neat. I can not just customize the experience of browsing and the timeline, I can also add extensions to my social media experience. I'm going to delete this because I don't need this on my feed. I use my account mostly for testing, so if you try to follow me on Blue Sky, you're going to see forgotten posts that I used for testing and never cleaned up. So I don't know whether you want to do that. Now, that's cool. That's nice. We have a client, we have a viewer. And the question is then, okay, what do we do with this? Or what else can we do with it? One of the things is when you generate things, you never stop generating them. So when we figured we can create code from lexicons, the natural step is generating lexicons from code. So here, I'll take all the Lepiter content types, so pages and snippets and all the snippet types. I'm going to generate a model from that, and I can check that the model actually holds what I need it to hold. And then I'm going to generate the JSON for that, and suddenly I have lexicons. So that's kind of neat. I can now automatically generate the specs for my classes. And this works for all classes, not just the Lepiter content types. This is especially interesting because, as I understand it, the Blue Sky team writes their spec by hand. So whenever they change something about their API, if they forget to put it in the lexicon, it's not in the spec. by auto-generating it, and this is really just, I mean, it should be somewhat obvious. If you do this, the things will always be in sync. So the ultimate test, of course, is then to take this and write it to disk and read it back in and see whether things have changed. They have not. I still have all the same properties. I can go and check whether everything works. I also see, interestingly, what object references what object. So I see that time is referenced a whole bunch, or the UID, which makes sense. All of these are very integral data types. So that all falls naturally out of the work, and none of that is really something that we wrote. We never wanted to explore necessarily, you know, how do our content types interrelate. But we had a view, and we knew how to generate code, and so it all just fell naturally in place. The next thing is editing lexicon files, and I have to thank John Brandt for this work. So something that's kind of annoying is when I want to know something about the API, like what API endpoint to call, I have to look at the lexicons, and that means going on the website and checking all the JSON. Now, when I have the lexicons on disk, I can check the JSON, but I can also go and see where things are defined. And this is not the same file, by the way. So one is a record JSON and one is defs JSON. I can just go from one thing to the other, and I know where things are. So that made it much faster, actually, to go and learn about the API. Another thing that then comes, and that's kind of still in a very early stage, but I'm hoping that we can expand that, is the other side, the server side. Because if you have those specs and you have your REST calls, you can automatically document your REST calls. But also, what happens here is, well, I know that this call takes the parameters foo and bar, and one is a Boolean and one is a string. So I can automatically validate the requests that are coming in because I know what the endpoint accepts. So that's exactly what this little subclass of Zinc JSON REST call does. Before you get your get, post, or whatever callback, it will actually go into the body and check that the content type is right and deserialize it if it knows how to do that. That was kind of helpful. Bless you. We have one server that works with that. We don't have a lot of stuff with it yet. We're hoping to extend it just to see whether we could write a good personal data server that is actually @proto compliant just by writing regular REST calls and having these little annotations. So that's kind of maybe the next step. We're not sure yet whether we're doing that and when we're doing that, but the infrastructure is there because the infrastructure was extremely easy to write. Once you have your tools, you can build other tools on top of them or next to them. And it takes literal minutes. The page view that I showed you earlier, I wrote yesterday evening because I realized we didn't have one and it would make for a nice demo. So I guess that's kind of all there is. And what I want to emphasize here is it's not about this client. It's about a way of working and a way of looking at things. I'm able to explore things better with a live approach, and I'm able to create things better because it gives me instant feedback. And already you can make a competing client. We're not competing with Blue Sky, but you can make a client where the experience is your own experience and you don't have a static website. And it's just natural when you have views, right? So that's where I'll leave things, and all that's left to do is thank you all and ask for your questions.
What is, it appears to be a protocol that is proprietary to Blue Sky, and who is Blue Sky, and what is their business model, and
Right.
is this going to become a interesting competitor to Twitter, et cetera?
Right. So as I understand it, while the protocol came out of the company, it is now a separate entity. I don't know the governance model, however, so I can't vouch for that. As for what is Blue Sky is a social media platform, relatively new. It was created by, I think, former, I don't know whether it's founders or executives at Twitter. I think Jack Dorsey is involved. So it was kind of this idea that maybe, we can make things federated and better, but I think they can do better marketing than Mastodon, which I think this is one of the interesting questions about entering a new age of social medias. And I'm not a big user. I haven't used Twitter. I don't really use Mastodon, So the question still remains, like, what's the selling point then actually for the average user? Because federation is nice and good, but people don't seem to actually care all that much when you. So I guess they were trying to experiment with other selling points as well. But for more, what is the selling point of Blue Sky? You'll have to ask the people at Blue Sky. Yeah.
Is I comment on that because there is this Noster protocol. I don't know if you know it, but about the selling point of this federated thing is it's more about like portable identities. The idea that you are not tied to a particular place, the particular provider of your way to connect to other people. And I think that now on Dave's question, the idea is that the selling point of all these alternative social media sites is portable identities that you can carry with you
Right.
several places, including Blue Sky, Noster, and Mastodon.
Right. So that's where the DID comes in. That's what the distributed identity means. Okay. I think that's all the questions. Thank you so much.